Yes, it's time for Type 40, your Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network. With me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks, and your responsible-ish designated driver back together with you for another year here in the console room. But it could be you're completely new to the show. If so, well, fear not. We like to make this all as accessible and fun, whether it's your first or your 51st. Whatever, we're the same free-speaking and big-thinking, eclectic and eccentric show for everyone. Whatever decade or century you started watching, reading or listening along to those ongoing adventures of our hero, Doctor Who. The latest season of new episodes of Doctor Who, they wrapped up on BBC One and all the other broadcasters all over the world just a few weeks ago now. And after a short break for Christmas and New Year ourselves, we're back with our take on the finale. By popular demand, unless your initials are maybe a double C. And yes, we're going to do our very best to throw in some laughs and some fun along the way. All the laughs and fun that they didn't manage to on Doctor Who Flux. So come and step into our TARDIS here on Type 40 with us. Here we all are again, friends for another roam around the fictional and real-life universes of Doctor Who here on Type 40. And I'm delighted to say that once again I'm joined by my fellow Vanquisher of all things vapid, my mate, Charlotte Shields.
Hello.
Hello, how are we? Happy New Year and all that.
Yeah, even though I had to watch this for a second time to understand what on earth was going on in this episode. So I do suffer, folks, for the art of the podcast.
She's still talking to me, everybody. She's still talking to me. Yeah, a lot can happen in a few weeks, can't it? And obviously, some things I think, even as Doctor Who fans, we try to block out.
Yeah, I think that's what my brain was doing. So it was just like, I can't remember most of this, so I had to watch it again.
And making up this first panel of 2022 with us, it's a big Happy New Year to a true believer and culture clasher. It can only be the return of Mr. Kyle Wagner.
Well, and the guy who let you put your stuff out on the airways too. But are you sure? I came onto this podcast. This is the podcast about how to deal with acid reflux, right?
Yes.
Kind of. It's nearer to the mark than one would think. It's good to see you, Kyle.
It's good to see you guys. Yeah, it's been an interesting time in Doctor Who land here in the United States as well. I've been following what you guys have been talking about, and I might have chosen to watch other things before I dove back into the Flux after watching the first episode. There's some great stuff out there like The Expanse and things like that. But no, it's this little season of the Flux summed up everything of the Chris Chibnall era, and I know we're going to get into it as we talk about the finale.
We are
the low level highs and the really low lows.
Because on one hand, we've got Charlotte, who gamely went back and put herself through the finale again for a full hour, but you had to do a bit of a catch up on the whole thing, didn't you? Because you did sort of. You fell away with Flux, didn't you, a few weeks ago?
I just spent the last week refluxing and also watching the New Year's holiday special, whatever they're calling it this go around. And all I gotta say is, after watching the New Year's special too, it feels like I've been in a Doctor Who time loop.
We're going to get stuck all into that in a couple of minutes. But before we get too deep into the good stuff, it's time to remind you that if you'd like to do some real-time traveling of your own, each and every edition of our show, present and future, is just a tap or two away if you know where to look. There's dozens of great conversations, reviews, previews, geek outs, and deep dives with all our friends and regular panelists. We know there's something for every Doctor Who fan at type40.podbean.com. There'll be more about all of that a little later on, as well as our essential connecting core to the matrix of all knowledge known as the Fandom Podcast Network. For a word about all the coverage of all the other great cult TV shows and movies and various other things that are going on all the other podcasts over there, some of which aren't even hosted by Carl Wagner.
I might know something. I might know something about the Fandom Podcast Network. I something tells me there's a memory somewhere in there. Where's that watch I put down?
A remnant. Get in the watch. Get in the watch. Yes, and we'll get stuck into that too. We'll have to find out what's going on with the network, won't we? But we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to get right deep into the Doctor Who talk. Flashback just a few weeks to that finale of Doctor Who Flux, The Vanquishers. Here it comes, everybody. Here it comes. Okay, yes. So it's been 6 weeks. Can you believe it? 6 weeks of Doctor Who Series 13, also known under that umbrella title of Flux, which quite understandably led to a lot of smart aleck remarks and rebadging and fan art that I don't think they'll ever truly live down. But it was all building up, wasn't it, to this season finale, this last chunk where ideally you'd like to think that it was all going to make sense. That could have been, in hindsight, quite a tall order, given the fact of what we know about Chris Chibnall's work up to now. But yeah, we're going to be looking at Chapter 6 of Flux, otherwise known as The Vanquishers. And just in case, just like Charlotte, you've forgotten all about it between then and now, here's a quick recap. It's the final epic chapter in the saga of Flux. All hope is lost. The forces of darkness are in control. But when the monsters have won, who can you count upon to save the universe? Yeah, this one was written by Chris Chibnall again and aired on the 5th of December, 2021. It starred Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor, along with Mandip Gill as Yasmin Khan and John Bishop as Dan Lewis. I actually got his name right. I got the character's name right. It's taken 3 months, everybody. It's taken 3 months. And it was directed again by Azhar Salim. So that's this is the balance of the episodes. If you remember that half of them were directed by a guy whose name was
Jamie
Magnus Stone. That's it. Jamie Magnus Stone. He's the one I like as well. I can't remember his name. So half were directed by him, and the other half was directed by this brand new director, Azhar. And the executive producers were Matt Strevens and Nikki Wilson, with the incidental music again by Segun Akinola. Okay, Kyle, when we last spoke, this whole effort had only just kicked off. It was the Halloween apocalypse, that very first episode. And I got the impression that you were already feeling quite fatigued, and that you were kind of over it, and that other things were on your mind. But in the time in between, obviously you haven't watched maybe at the momentum that we have. But in the time in between, there's been those 4 other episodes. Bring us up to speed on what you thought about the body of this season before we get into how it concludes and how it gets tied together. I mean, were you hopeful when you pressed play on this finale? And did it all make sense for you that it was leading somewhere big? Okay,
so the whole Flux as a whole was incredibly frustrating to me because I look, especially you had the first episode, which was up and down. The Dan character did nothing for me in the first episode. We've got Fluffy, the alien dog, coming to rescue his human, and it was just very frustrating. I actually really liked the second episode because I getting back to some classic Doctor Who villains.
War of the Sontarans.
The Sontarans, I don't know who I'm a fan of anyway. And I thought that was a really good episode. And I even like some of the new concepts that they actually introduced involving the Weeping Angels. But everything else was just confusing. And it felt like Chris Chibnall basically said, okay, I have to justify everything I've done, and I'm going to do it in this Flux arc. And it just didn't work. There's concepts that are introduced without any explanation, characters that are introduced without any explanation. And then when you get explanations for certain characters and certain new things that Chibnall introduced in the Flux, nothing makes sense. It's just like he was just grabbing ideas out of the air and saying, this sounds like a good one. This sounds like a good one. Oh, but I don't have it fleshed out at all. I'm just kind of rapid firing things out there, and we'll see what people like. And the problem was nobody liked any of it. Honestly, the only thing that I really cared for as far as new ideas in this was I really liked, and I'm blanking on the character's name now. He was the captain that we saw in the in the first episode when he's exiled out on that station.
Vinder.
Vinder, yeah.
I actually liked him, and I kind of liked the story of him with his life mate and her traveling through. But again, there was still a lot of things there. And then of course we have, what was it? The Ravagers were the two villains here.
Who
got
knows?
up on the screen.
Yeah, Swarm and Azure were the two bad guys. I agree with you. I thought they were quite well played and nicely realized. Don't know what they were.
Beautiful makeup job, incredibly well acted with crazy material, and I still have no idea what exactly their agenda was, other than to watch the Flux destroy the universe on a time with a repeat with the loop button pushed on. That was it. I mean, it was.
I think that you, on that first review show of Series 13, you used the expression throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Charlotte and I have been through most of these shows together, and whichever guest we've had on for each review in the middle, Charlotte, somebody has come out with a version of that statement, haven't they? This is something that everybody seems to be feeling.
Yeah, and I think sort of, obviously, once I finish watching the series, if I were to sort of try and like verbalize what it felt like a series fighting itself. It didn't know what it wanted to be. The tone shifted so much in some of these episodes, and like Carl was saying, there were so many different storylines and characters that it felt like they were fighting to have enough time to be developed, and it just all didn't come together at the end. And yet everybody, I've seen other reviews, even some of the press that's traditionally in the UK been very friendly to this era, even they were saying this is convoluted, it's messy, it's everywhere. Like those terms were even being used by journalists, which is telling.
The Guardian, the Radio Times, and even Doctor Who magazine itself gave this episode an absolute slating. I haven't actually read the reviews because I do try not, even when there's been weeks in between seeing them and reviewing them myself, I try not to let my own opinions get coloured too much, because I think you can already pick up generally from the reception on social media or just with friends and family how things are being generally received. But I try not to read or listen or watch too much before we record this stuff. But sometimes something. It's like it's like in Star Wars when the Death Star destroys that planet, and it's as if 1,000 voices cried out. Sometimes that effect is audible in itself. It was like a wave of meh that this episode was met with. After 6 weeks isn't a great period of time. It's only a moderate build up, but. Another phrase that I've heard a lot throughout Flux was that Chris Chibnall, as a writer and showrunner, spent all of this time jangling his keys and never ultimately doing anything with it all, never taking it anywhere, and never putting his foot down. And I think that's completely accurate too. I think what we've got here is something that was deliberately designed to be extravagant and to beat and to baffle us into a kind of submission to it, and into a complacency of sorts that we'd be that relieved when it did end, Kyle.
Well, no, I have thoughts on this, because I think you are 100% right, except he got thwarted before Flux ever came out, because what I have noticed, at least from my end and here in the States, is as soon as Russell was announced coming back, even those who supported Chibnall just kind of have abandoned ship. Even whether they're bashing it or not, but they're just not speaking up anymore, because it's like Russell's coming back. It's like, there's a light on the horizon, and I think it sabotaged what Chibnall was going to try to do with Flux. I think Chibnall's mindset was, I'm just going to confuse them so much that they're not going to question what I'm doing, because they're going to be so confused they're not going to know. And I think with the announcement of Russell coming back, it's just like everybody's like, fine, just do whatever. We know we're getting past it. And I think that's really kind of changed Chibnall's little master plan that he had.
It's one thing, though, isn't it, Kyle? You watch what both of you do, come to think of it, watch a lot of modern TV shows. And I think we all appreciate, don't we, arc storytelling. And we are glad of programs and program makers who don't talk down to us. And we don't mind doing some of the connecting ourselves. And that can be some of the fun of it. Even with a creative fan base like the Doctor Who fan base. But this comes across as I think that in respect to Flux, the audience was expected to do more of the work than those who made it did. And to me, that's a drastic difference. That's unforgivable. And that means that this entire effort, and in particular the Vanquishers, which by no means was the worst episode of the season, but wasn't far off, means that it probably should never have been broadcast in this form. And I mean, the fact this was on for a full hour. And at one time, I would have relished an extra 10 minutes of any Doctor Who episode. And you would think with an extra 10 minutes, they'd deliver something that was fit for purpose, Charlotte, that does tick absolutely every single box and leaves any viewer feeling completely satisfied and at least clear of the story that they've been told on the night, ideally for the entire 6 weeks, but certainly in the 60 minutes that had directly preceded it.
See, my frustration was throughout the whole of Flux, he kept talking about the Doctor's past. He kept having the Doctor ask multiple people, what's my past? What are these memories? Who was I? That was her sort of, if she had a theme throughout this series, that was what the Doctor was doing. And I was like, I didn't really care so much about some of the other stuff because I didn't really care about those characters by the end of it. I didn't care about Vinda and Belle.
They're never developed enough for us to begin to care about them, are they? That's the same.
That's my point, though. I was like, if that doesn't get paid off, I'm not going to be that annoyed. But the one thing I did sort of care's probably a strong word, like I wanted to see what he'd do with it at least, was the Timeless Child stuff and was these memories that he kept having the Doctor just wander around aimlessly trying to understand. And then I was just like, just answer answer the core thing of she is the Timeless Child and what does that actually mean for the Doctor? Not just a load of words which sound impressive. And because what is that little bit of the past?
Tectoine, before they killed her in the blink of an eye, Tectoine confirmed that in the episode directly before this, didn't she, in Survivors of the Flux?
Yeah, she said, the Doctor said, was the Master lying? And she said no to her. But that means you can't just state something, Chibnall. I need to actually see what weight this has as a story device. And I was just, that was the only thing I really wanted to see a payoff for. And the way he dealt with that near the end of the episode, I actually felt was insulting. Because you kept saying, you're going to get an answer, and then we didn't. And it was cowardly as well. It came across very cowardly to me, the way he treated the Timeless Child stuff and at the end.
I think people's patience has been completely spent. And although the Doctor Who community being as creative as it is, it has inspired people to try and track it and make sense of it with things like enormous infographics, which can be a challenge to any fan and designer, maybe, to turn any of this into something that you can plot and make any kind of color-coded sense of. But Doctor Who fans, they shouldn't need to have to make great big wall charts to attach bits of string between even the most extraneous characters, should they, Kyle, to keep track of what is supposed to be a family adventure show for the whole family.
Okay, so my head hurts looking at that, first of all. Charlotte brought up a great point, though. And I completely agree with her. Chris Chibnall insulted the fans' intelligence with the Flux. Because here you have this whole big thing. His big thing has been the Timeless Child. That has been his stamp on Doctor Who. And here you have this thing where you're supposed to be getting the payoff. We know that this was his big, like when Russell first left the first time in the big 5 multi-part story with Tennant as the 10th Doctor and bringing in all the characters. This felt like that's what he was trying to do here, but very poorly. Here's the thing that's absolutely frustrating. You have all this things from the Timeless Child, which he addresses in multiple episodes throughout the Flux. We finally get to the point where we should be getting the payoff. She's got the watch. We know that the the Swarm has been planning to use these memories against her. And then at the end of the episode, all it is it turns out to be, oh, well, it's a thing she's holding on to too tight and she can't fix the flux because she's holding on too tight. And then she just throws it away. And it's like, it was like, okay, that to me, her dumping it down inside to the depths of the TARDIS, unless Chibnall has a payoff in his last couple of episodes, which he better, or it's going to go down as confirmed as probably the most incoherent run of Doctor Who ever. But to not pay that off to the fans in any storm of fact, even if, let's say, she gets the memories back, but the storyline you could have done with her getting those memories back, even if you're not a fan of that timeless child idea, there's some really cool storylines they could have executed out of that. Just being overwhelmed again by all of these memories that are taking place, and maybe the Doctor realizing, I'm not the person I thought I was. I think there was interesting concepts there, but they insulted the fans and basically said, yeah, no, the Doctor's just choosing to be who the Doctor is as of now, and doesn't care. And yet it was her main priority since the Master made the reveal back last season. And it's completely insulting to build something up like that and then just have it literally thrown down the trash bin.
Yeah, and also to repeat the lesson, because he's had to do a video literally explaining this after the series aired for the YouTube channel. And from what I've not watched it,
I haven't seen this.
Oh, have you not heard about the video? He literally did a breakdown video explaining the Flux, like an 8-minute video, and he's been torn apart for it.
That's that's going to get a review in itself. Coming soon to a future edition of Type 40.
That just indicates when you have to explain your own writing, that means it's terrible writing.
Yeah, but in the explaining video, he talked about that scene with the watch. And this is probably going to infuriate you more. Do you know why, apparently, according to Chibnall, she dropped the watch?
Go on.
Because she's learned she's not defined by her past.
I see.
Which isn't that what happened in The Timeless Child? Didn't she literally get told that by Joe Martin's doctor? So
oh dear.
repeating a lesson again.
And this video that was put up on YouTube, how soon after the finale was that put up? Do we know?
Oh, within a week or two? I can't remember. I think it was within a week. I could be wrong, but I can't. I just know he did it, and
was
people
it filmed
were like,
months ago, or has he gone back to the studio? Because obviously, production of Doctor Who, apart from a bit of post-production on the Centenary special, which airs next October, it's all done. Everybody's left the building. People's contracts are over. The shutters are down, for all intents, on the Doctor Who production office, as was at Rothlock. So I would think they could have even dragged him back into a studio to record that for the YouTube channel, because the confusion out there, the way that we've received this was how everybody received it. And although here we are talking about stuff that happens that's on screen in the last 10 minutes of this hour's worth of TV, it's hard not to go straight to that, because everything that was on screen in the run-up to it was so distended and so badly curated. It made it all feel completely inconsequential, and as if we were just waiting for the end credits to roll and for it all to be over. I mean, I can't remember ever having sat through a series, and in fact, I could say this for the entire Chris Chibnall era, to have stayed the course of something in the fantasy genre, which I've loved all my life, Kyle. I've watched a lot of things sometimes out of duty, but there is no way I would have watched past week 2 of this if it hadn't have been Doctor Who. And I agree with you about episodes such as War of the Sontarans, for example. I think that had some merit. It did feel like Doctor Who to some extent. It was diverting, is the word that I used at the time. We reviewed Village of the Angels on the show, myself and Simon Horton. We talked about that at some length. And again, because Jamie Magnus Stone was also behind that, he directed that one, and it had some good actors in. It managed to tap into something primal about Doctor Who somewhere along the way that just goes out of the window as soon as Jodie Whittaker steps on the set. But it never coalesces. And so the body of this is full of what feel like vignettes, Kyle. Do you remember how they used to do for shows like Battlestar Galactica?
Oh,
they used to drop out like 10 or 15-minute vignettes for them on the Sci-Fi Channel that they'd sometimes pull together for YouTube or whatever. That's all that this episode of Flux feels like. It feels like 10 minutes of this, 10 minutes of that, just dotted around here and there, jammed together to make a screenplay.
Okay, so when I look at this episode, first of all, you hit it right on the head because they split we have 3 different versions of the Doctor running around in 3 different timelines.
Don't remind me. Jodie Whittaker in triplicate. When that happened on screen, I actually said out loud. Well, actually, I won't say what I said because it'll be rude. But yeah, I exclaimed something somewhat blue.
And here's my frustration with it. You have this whole tunnel system thing, which they never paid off. And then in this last episode, she talks about the importance of this guy and what he's done, and yet we have no idea.
No idea who he was. Forgotten his name. Can't remember a single thing he said.
So you've got that. You've got her with Swarm and everything that's going on with the headquarters of the Division, which, again, the Division. What is it? We still don't have a definition of what the heck the Division is.
And it's all over. It was all over and done with within 10 minutes of screen time again after all that build-up. That was worth destroying 50-odd years worth of Doctor Who lore over for something that the screen time can't have come to more than 5 to 10 minutes, Charlotte?
Oh, yeah, and it was Teptayun, like, she got killed off really quickly, it felt like in the previous episode. And also Kate Stewart. Talk about a waste of a returning character, a character that's got quite a good legacy in New Who. She's quite well liked, and she was utterly underserved. She was just confused. There to say some exposition lines.
I was confused, Charlotte. I said on the last show I was confused by Kate Stewart's presence. I think Gemma Redgrave is usually a class act, and I've liked this character. In the past, it seemed right that she was picking up this baton. And yet in this, she seemed like she'd been given the script that morning. She seemed Gemma Redgrave, who has been acting a very long time. Sorry, Gemma, but you seemed barely awake doing this. And the character didn't even feel like Kate Stewart. And I don't want to put too much on the actress because maybe it was given to her in a short period of time. And I think I know why, because I believe that all that material was originally intended for Captain Jack Harkness, as played by John Barrowman. I think he was meant to be the leader of the resistance to the Sontarans on Earth. I think that would completely fit in. I'd even go so far as to say that the organization that the Serpent infiltrated and that got closed down and then opened back up again by the time this was all playing out, I think that was originally meant to be Torchwood, because that would fit in perfectly with when we last saw Jack at the end of Revolution of the Daleks, walking off into the night to reconnect with Gwen and potentially to, it seemed to me, restore Torchwood. I think you'd mentioned that, Kyle, and leave it open to, if not a further series of Torchwood, then at the very least for it to be a parallel presence in the Doctor Who universe again. So I think that in light of the cancelling of John Barrowman, rightly or wrongly, that happened last year, that Kate Stewart was brought in, and maybe even some of this material, I believe it was rewritten and maybe even reshot. I don't think we'll know any answer to that for a while. What do you think, Kyle?
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. I think John Barrowman was supposed, as Jack Harkness, was supposed to have a much bigger role in this series, because they set it up too much in that episode where he came back, and they set up too many things. I think he was supposed to probably have a running through this entire thing, and maybe even dealing with the Serpent character. Maybe that was going to be his side story, was chasing his nemesis, chasing him down. And I really think that Chris Chibnall had intentions of, I'm bringing back Torchwood, and this is how I'm going to do it with the Flux. And then everything happened with John, and he just got left hanging out to dry. And that's one of the reasons why this particular run of Doctor Who feels so disconjointed, because I think he lost a big piece of it. and he's not a good enough writer to write on the fly. And I think it destroyed any continuity he had between the episodes. And I think that's a big part of it. And I just think, like I said, I think between that, knowing he was leaving, and it just was just the grand summation of everything that was the Chibnall era. Some interesting ideas that he had no idea how to execute, and just poor thought process through everything he did. And I mean, even to me, the Flux, nothing felt dangerous in this. The Flux didn't feel dangerous. No. Swarm felt a little bit dangerous, but otherwise it was just like, I didn't feel like anything was a true threat.
Well, I think that everything that we have to thank for any feeling of danger in the entirety of Flux, and even in episode 6, I think that we still have to give some praise to the actor Sam Spruill, who played Swarm. I thought that he was generally, I don't want to use words like outstanding, because it's not that kind of part. It's a very conventional boo-hiss bad guy part. But I thought he was excellent in the role. And Rashinda Sandal, who had a lot less to do as Azure, the fact that we didn't realise that there was next to nothing to these characters until quite late in the day means that they upheld their end of this whole process pretty well. But they were also served quite badly by this. Now, again, it's another case of a Chris Chibnall villain, a Chris Chibnall presence that ultimately proved to be a nothing, so no threat at all. He pulled exactly the same stunt with those two characters that he pulled with Ashad, the last Cyberman in Series 12. It was a click of the fingers, and that threat was completely gone. It was as if they no longer existed. There was barely a question asked about where they were from, what they wanted, why they wanted it, and we'll probably never get answers to any of that at any point. We're expected to just forget about it and move on and keep up and don't ask questions. This is Doctor Who. This is supposed to be fun. But I don't think even children watching, the very few children that are still invested in this show, there aren't many, and I don't take any pleasure in saying any of this. I'm not going to be won over by any of that at all, and neither are they the comedy elements to this story. To have spent all that time in week 2 developing the Sontarans and sort of reconnecting them to the original old school appeal of the Sontarans and how they looked and how they behaved. And there's this really strange sequence in this episode where they corner a Sontaran, again played by the long-suffering Dan Starkey. I think Dan Starkey is wonderful. How they could have roped him back in for this cheap bit of tat, I don't know. But this scene where he's feasting on chocolate in a corner shop, Charlotte, it's as you said, this is more examples of stuff that just jars. Either side of it, none of it fits, does it?
Well, yeah, as soon as, obviously, because Kate was the one who introduced this plot idea of corner shops. And as soon as that word came out of her mouth, and this is even before we saw this scene, I was just like, Chibnall, what are you doing? Like, why? You purposely made them, like you said in episode 2 of this run, more warlike. The thing that Moffat got probably, I think, the most criticism for during his run was the treatment of the Sontarans. And for him to appear to go back on that and to go, no, I'm going to make them serious again. And then to literally have a scene where one's got a sugar rush or chocolate craving and literally have him go, chocolate. It was just like, I felt like I'd been put in another universe.
And it's not like you or I, Charlotte. We've both got a sense of humour, haven't we? We like the fun episodes of Doctor Who. But this didn't. It didn't feel like it was supposed to be that kind of episode. 1 minute it was doing something cataclysmic. The next moment we have a scene like this. And it's hard
and also, the problem was you had the Doctor and everybody else treating it seriously. Like, yeah, of course we'd find one of these fellas in a corner shop stuffing his face. And then to also give away, like, secrets and to help them infiltrate his own base for a bit of chocolate. That's literally what happened. Like, when you say it out loud, you just go, what on earth was Chibnall thinking?
I think that if there has to be the biggest indicator, really, of how out of step Chris Chibnall is with the audience and with the place that the series is at now, okay, we are hopefully on the threshold of something much bigger and much better. But as things stand now, we're in the crater of damage done to the show, to its profile by not only him, but by Jodie Whittaker. I think to effectively to give us those three or even four versions of the character played by Jodie Whittaker?
Technically four, because which we'll get to. Time is now a person, so we technically had a time version of her and the free split versions.
I thought time was a planet. I'm confused.
Oh,
it was a planet It was a planet 2 weeks ago, Kyle. Now it's a person. This is just one of those great. If you were to talk, if somebody's to ask you, like, I haven't seen Doctor Who for a while, is it worth catching up? What happened in the last episode? What's going on in Doctor Who now? Well, at the moment, there's a planet called Time. Yeah, they wouldn't believe a word you were saying, or they just leave the conversation thinking, you know what? I'm glad I stopped watching that show when I did, because this isn't lore, is it? This is. I'm not even sure what this is. It just seems to me to be more mumbo jumbo and more wasting the goodwill of the audience who are sticking with this. I mean, I lost faith during the mauling of the series lore in the last series. Once you throw all of that out, the baby out with the bathwater, I was completely disenfranchised by that. But I've tried to come at this and view it as I would any other fantasy show. And there is simply no body to any of the soup, to the watery soup of the rest of it. There's nothing to nourish one at all. All we have are these really nebulous ideas and thoughts and glib naming of things. That sounds like a fun idea, or that sounds like a big idea. A war between time and space. What does that mean? I don't know, but it sounds good, doesn't it? And so to not explore that in any way, it's cynical and unforgivable. And it, rather than to... Okay, and during the course of this, to bring us characters like Belle and Vinda, who were played by Jacob Anderson, and what's the name of the actress, Thadia Graham, who played Belle, who I think were two of the more believable characters and the believable performances in this, considering the material that they got. They seemed quite in tune with what they were doing, even if they weren't with what everybody else was. So to give us these characters and not develop them, the same with Carvanista, who I still there's a few people who do really quite like Carvanista. The Rabbi is a big fan of Carvanistas. I never warmed to it at all. But rather than develop those characters and bring them together in the way that, say, Russell T Davies did with the Children of Time at the conclusion of Series 4, for example, he doesn't develop any of them. He doesn't bring any of them together as some sort of Ocean's 11 or A-Team that are going to stop the Flux. Rather than doing that, he duplicates the lead character, who we all know hasn't been working at all. In fact, works worse now than when Whittaker first took the role. So he duplicates that character, dots her around all over the place, so that versions of the Doctor can somehow talk to themselves. It's everything that's bad about the way Chris Chibnall tells his stories, just in triplicate, littered throughout this entire thing, and we're supposed to hold on for dear life. Not just us, but the rest of the cast. I got the impression watching this, particularly the second time, and you could see the looks in their eyes. I don't think anybody in the cast for the Vanquishers had the faintest idea what they were saying or why, with the exception of one actor, the consummate professional that is Kevin McNally, who's once again playing Professor Jericho in this for a third episode. I thought he was outstanding. I played the role with as much gusto and conviction and believability. This man is a fantastic character actor, has been for decades, stuff like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies and various period dramas, comedies. Wherever he turns up, he's always good. but one actor in a cast of a dozen. I mean, Kyle, was there anybody in this you felt that stood out at all?
Obviously, Jericho was one of the main characters that actually stood out, and that's just because of the amazing performance. But nobody stood out, and I think you hit on something for me too, Dan, as you were talking about Chibnall. Here's what I think Chibnall is. Chibnall is a great idea man in that he can throw out an idea, but he does not know how to develop his own ideas. It's like a space-time war developed right could be a really great Doctor Who story. Yeah. But he doesn't know how. He can give you an idea to start with, but he has no idea. He needs somebody else to develop it for him.
Can you imagine, Kyle, if somebody like Jack Kirby was given something like that? A true storyteller from the past.
Give me J. Michael Straczynski. He could probably write the hell out of that.
Charlotte, what do you think?
It's because he can't do fully rounded characters, and I think Flux has really shown that up. And especially in this episode with Carvin, because we suddenly find out in like one scene when it's not really been signposted that he was really close with, I'm guessing, the Roof Doctor, and the Doctor even says to him, "Oh, you were my companion." So that's hinting that they actually had a proper Doctor companion sort of relationship, and they were really close.
Rather than them just being part of some task force in a flashback, which that was week 3, wasn't it?
Yeah. So if you're gonna try and convince us in this episode that they were that close, why didn't you in the flashback have Dan, who was basically supposed to be Carvinista, have him show like care, or maybe have the Doctor in danger and have Carvinista like go to help her, because then it wouldn't feel so out of place for him to suddenly have this emotional scene. You could see that's what they were trying to do, and it's like
there's a reason for that.
Why?
Chris Chibnall has something implanted in his brain to where he can't show connections between characters too soon, or he gets poisoned and killed. It's also like
with Jericho. Like the way he died was pathetic. He literally died because he dropped the ring, the thingy. What was it? The teleport ring, whatever it was. Like, really? That's how you're gonna make your character go? Like, that's how you're gonna end the character?
And he's the only character in the thing that dies, which means it's the only real component part of the story that ultimately has. It's the only component part of the story that is seen to pay a price, to sacrifice anything, is when Professor Jericho loses his life. I mean, we're told that a massive portion of the universe has been destroyed by this. We never really see it. We never see the impact of it. The Doctor never seems particularly bothered by this, so why should we be? But with this character, it's as if he was giving Kevin McNally all of the heavy lifting to do to bring any kind of power to this episode at all. Here's the one character that you liked. Here's the one character that seemed kind of developed. So we're gonna kill him. It just seems like, again, another cynical move to get a moment, a very, very fleeting moment of pathos, and then we're on to something else. And the character of Jericho, he's barely mentioned again. In fact, he's not mentioned at all by Dan. Yaz kind of sniffs away. They've spent the last 3-4 calendar years traveling the world with this guy. And yet they just sort of brush him off. And the character of Claire is back in this episode too. But again, very, very fleetingly. She was in the first episode and then again in Village of the Angels. Who played Claire? I thought that she was really good. That was Annabelle Scully. Again, a very grounding presence in that character. Completely forgotten about. They sort of drag her into this and attach her story to the rest of it. Sort of. They pull her along with it, and she's there at the end with Kate Stewart, so maybe she'll go and work for UNIT. I don't know. Has she still got an angel inside her? Who knows? Who cares? Will we ever find out? Well, at the same with the character of Diane, played by Nadia Albina, Dan's colleague. I mean, it's all these characters who never really get developed, never go anywhere.
what he did with Diane was worse. He made her unlikable because all of a sudden it's Dan's fault that she got captured. She literally said to him, you were late. And I was watching it going, he was kidnapped by a dog. You were kidnapped by an alien with sparkles on their face. He spent 4 years trapped in the past, but he was late for your date. It's like, why? Like, why are you blaming him? It made no sense whatsoever.
And here's the other thing. She's just been through her own fantastical thing here that no understanding at all. I mean, there's that. And then you talk about the Claire character. Here she's introduced at the end of the first episode of this Flux series, like she's going to be this major character. And then it's like, other than the beaming, she has an angel trapped inside of her. Okay, that's kind of interesting, but it doesn't pay off. And she's nowhere near the character that they make her appear to be at the end of from the first episode of the Flux. And it's just incredibly frustrating. And it feels like we're repeating ourselves because it's the same problem over and over again. And it doesn't correct itself. And the only way it's going to get corrected is when Russell comes back, because Chris Chibnall has shown, it almost feels like to me, especially with the Flux, he was right. He had this idea for another television show and he adapted it to Doctor Who.
And that's, to be honest, I mean, that's been the story of most of his tenure, really. You kind of think, well, if you wanted to tell this story, if you wanted to run this kind of show, why did you do this to Doctor Who? I wanted to ask you, Kyle, because when you were last in, we just had the very first episode starring John Bishop as Dan Lewis, an actor, a personality. I'm not sure I can seriously call him an actor, a personality that you'd never seen before in anything. During the course of Flux, did you warm to him at all? How did you think he acquitted himself? I mean, the things the character is given to do are no better and no worse than anybody else, really. But did you warm to him at all? And how did you feel about the way the arc of the character? Did he even have one?
He was there. I mean, that's it's like everybody else. They were there, and I don't think it's not the actor's fault.
No, it's
and
not.
I actually. Jumping ahead a little bit, I actually liked him in the New Year's special. I actually thought he was a little bit more rounded in that. But here you have this new companion who should be kind of a focus, I think, through this storyline. And what is he? He's basically, he's the human that must be fetched. That's why he, we had the girl who waited. We have the human to be fetched. That's that. You see the craziness between the two there? It's ridiculous. And
even though there is this reunion between him and Diane, which is exactly as you described, Charlotte, I can't add to that. That's perfect. Ridiculous. He never really spends much time with Carvanista. Carvanista does appear again, but again, it's all really confused. Carvanista has a moment with the Doctor. A few weeks ago, Carvanista was trying to kill the Doctor. What?
I'm going to tell you right now. You look at this picture you have on screen. I'd watch that show with these three characters.
I wouldn't.
You know what? I probably would as well, because at least it's a blank canvas. It doesn't feel like you'd be ruining another show, an established show, to tell stories about some box fresh characters. I don't know. I mean, in the end, I think that Vinda in particular. We took him to be the Captain Jack substitute. And I think part of his material probably was also intended for John Barrowman. I'd say it was divided up between Jacob Anderson. This poor bloke. I feel so sorry for you, Jacob. Between Jacob and Kate Stewart, we'll probably not know the answer to this for a good few years yet. As for Thadia Graham as Belle, again, I thought she was trying her best and at least felt sort of authentic up to a point. But then again, everybody's going to feel authentic stood next to a 6-foot dog.
Well, no, but I want to add this in. Maybe not as these characters, but these two actors, they would have been more exciting companions than any of the companions we've had so far.
Oh God,
in this run.
Yeah, fair play.
Yeah, I think in Flux he's probably had some of the best casting he's had. Not the main cast because they're all established. I think he's had some of the best supporting actors. and some of the best actors, because the Grand Serpent, I know that actor. I've seen him in shows, and he's very, very good at being slimy. That's Craig Parkinson. That's the type of character Craig plays very well. He plays villains. He plays people you don't trust. And the Grand Serpent, he just became nothing. And what even frustrated me was that scene when Jodie was supposed to be getting tortured. They were literally in the script teasing us what he was. Like, she was saying, "Oh, you've got a double heart rate and all this," and then they just stopped doing it. And then, so we still don't know what race he is or where he comes from, or anything to do with why he has that snake power. And I was like, why literally have a scene when you're starting to like tell us physical traits? And she was literally trying to work out what he was. And then number 2 doctor comes walking in, so she stops.
Do you think we'll see him again, Charlotte?
Oh no. Like I said, I felt sorry for Craig, because he can play a good part if you give him the right material.
Yeah, I thought he was wonderful, and he seemed to be having, again, just like the guy who plays Swarm, seemed to be having a really good time with it. And I just felt really sorry that the material was so thin, and ultimately went nowhere. I mean, that's when you think about it. There's several people sort of in orbit around all of this. I include Tectuine in that, played by Barbara Murray. What a waste. What you've just said about the supporting characters, Charlotte, that is bang on. When you think Craig Parkinson, Barbara Murray, all these people, Annabelle Scolias, Claire, and Kevin McNally.
Yeah, Jericho and Kevin. Yeah, he got some really establishment actors in the UK. Obviously, in America they might not be known, but in the UK, those are well-known names. Steady hands, familiar faces. It should have all at least come together a lot better than this. I mean, I went back and I looked, because I watched this sort of a second time in preparation to come and talking about this, because it has been a few weeks, and like I say, the story didn't really sink in. Elements of it and scenes of it seemed to crash into one another. It reminded me of that 1993 Children Need Special Dimensions in Time, where the doctors and the companions are crashing in and out of one another. That was all for charity, done in 15 minutes. This feels exactly what, like, if they'd have tried to spun that out to last a full hour, that's what it would have been like. It would have been the Vanquishers desperately, frantically trying to give us the impression of something epic and something of consequence, and ultimately alienating the audience, baffling all but the most, baffling everybody, and completely disenfranchising all but 2 or 3 of the most ardent apologists who stalk Twitter, trying to stamp out any dissent, which with this episode was completely futile, because the reception absolutely everywhere was a next to universal thumbs down. It may not be an all-time low. I think The Timeless Children was probably that, or maybe even Once Upon a Time. I think we've had several lows. There's been one after another. But I think with this rounding off Doctor Who as a regular show, Kyle, under Chris Chibnall, it sees it sort of limping off into the sunset, really.
So there's a couple of things here. First of all, I think after watching the Flux, I came away going, 80% of the problems with Doctor Who right now are Chris Chibnall. Jodie has her place, but it is very obvious it is Chris Chibnall not knowing how to write this. Okay, this picture right here. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around this. Okay, we have Light Doctor, Dark Doctor. Was that the whole intent here? Was he trying to for a little Star Wars here, like the Force and the dark side? And I mean, that's the thing. We're never going to know. But one of the things that I find very interesting is, we talk about the Wars and the Centaurians, and also the Village of Angels, where we talked about, it kind of felt like they were trying to pull something that felt like Doctor Who out of there. That's more credit, I think, to the directors of those the director on those episodes than anything else, that they were able to pull that feeling
I think Jamie Magnus Stone and the co-writer of Village of the Angels, Maxine Alderton, they have between them a good grasp of texture and of building character and of telling a good Doctor Who story. No, actually, scrub that. I think they have a better grasp of who the audience for this show is and how to reach them.
Well, and when you watch those episodes, and again, the boat is sailed on Jodie. You can, whether you like her or not, the boat is sailed on her. But those were episodes where I was like, Jodie didn't feel as a Doctor like she was completely spastic. And again, it just goes to show me, I think this has been a Chris Chibnall cluster from day one. And no, there's nobody. He could have had Matt Smith. He could have had David Tennant, and I think we would still be having issues. Matt Smith or David Tennant might have said, "Regenerate me after season 1 of Chris Chibnall."
I don't think anybody will be able to recall barely a single moment of the entire Flux saga by Easter, Charlotte.
Yeah, I think it might be, I remember this odd scene, or I remember this odd moment that wasn't too bad. And I think as well, we've talked about this 6-part type of storytelling where it's supposed to all connect. And I understand that probably a big reason for that was because of the restrictions. And it probably was, they had to basically condense a lot of things. But I'm sorry, Chibnall should not have done this route. He should have just done 6 episodes of standalone stories and then have the end deal with the division, which you could have done in a normal setup.
Exactly. We're not unreasonable people. We're not monsters. We understand this show. We know what we like and we know why we came to Doctor Who in the first place. But if you think back to when this season started on the publicity trail and Chibnall started talking up this series, and he says, we decided in the light of the current global situation and the pandemic and the restrictions on what we can do and how we can do it, maybe we should scale things back. Maybe we should be conservative. Maybe we should think like this or think like that. And he boasted about how he weighed all that up and decided, no, we're going to tell the biggest story ever. So this was a conscious decision by this creative who was showrunner of what is still technically one of the great intellectual properties in the genre. In fact, probably in any genre all over the world. So this was his decision. It was the wrong decision. And you've completely and utterly blown it, Chris. This is totally on you. It was the wrong decision to make to go for the biggest story ever, because you've turned in a series that makes no sense at all, that has driven even more of the audience away, and that will be forgotten in next to no time. That's told him. Yeah. We're going to take a short break now, I think, to cleanse ourselves a little, and instead check in with the multiverse of everything else on all the other podcasts that are stretching across the Fandom Podcast Network. So here is a friend of ours with a couple of minutes worth of all of that, all those other great conversations going on all those other shows over there. Check it all out. I'll be back in a couple of minutes with more from Charlotte, Kyle, and myself.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Yes, we've teased and tantalized you there, as always, and we can even clothe you too. There's merch to match all of those shows, including Type 40. If you head over to the tpublic.com store, search for the Fandom Podcast Network, and you'll find a store full of all the team colours for all of the podcasts on everything from those T-shirts to phone cases and tapestries and whatever else. Treat yourself, treat your other selves, and it all goes to support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain. So everybody wins. Yes, I'm back with the crew here on Type 40. Charlotte and Kyle are rooted to the spot because they can't wait to find out. We've vented about this for the last 3 parts of an hour. I was going to say, was it just us? We know it wasn't just us. This was an absolute and total disaster. But how were the ratings? That's... God. This is usually the part of the show where things get a little bit more fun. Taking stock of the ratings of this series has been a pastime of Doctor Who fans for decades now, and that does seem to frustrate some out there. Why are we still interested in such things? It's the 21st century. We live in the streaming age. But again, the disclaimer has to be, when a show like Doctor Who, the majority of its audience is still made up of people who watch it live on that night by a massive margin. Therefore, those overnight ratings are they're just as important as ever they were. And yeah, we have the latest figures in. So have you been keeping track of the ratings, Kyle? Because it's been a similar story in the States to how it's been in the UK. Reception's not been brilliant.
To be honest with you, the Flux wasn't even advertised in the US. It wasn't. It was. I don't remember seeing any ads for the Flux anywhere. I've seen it more now as it's ended, because streaming services like AMC Plus, which have some kind of agreement for Doctor Who, and obviously HBO Max, but just general ad, there was nothing. There was. Oh, that existed? I didn't even know. It was really, it was terrible, and I can't imagine that the US ratings were good. And following from the chats from you guys, it sounds like it was just downhill from the start on every episode of the Flux.
It's been bad. It's been really, really bad. But I can reveal, surprisingly, that there was an uptick for episode 6 of the Flux. Yeah, ratings did go up a little over on BBC America, up to 0.41 million people after a decline pretty much. Yeah, it's wavered. I think it'd be unfair to say a decline all the way through, but it's never really got out of the early 0.3 figure. It's certainly nowhere near the kind of figures that it was getting just a couple of years ago. And that slight uptick, it's nothing really to write home about it.
That is what we call a finale uptick. That is an uptick because, maybe we're going to get some question answers. Well, let's just see. And I think a lot of people, out of confusion, thought this was going to be the end of the Fluxes when Jodie was going to regenerate. I think there was some confusion on that. And
I think
so-
there is. In fact, not just the finale, but when the New Year's Day special aired too, a lot of people online, people who aren't as deeply entrenched in the franchise as we are, Charlotte, there is confusion out there because people know that she's leaving, and because it's special after special after special and conclusion after conclusion after conclusion, people are turning up expecting the money shot, aren't they? The payoff when she's going to burst into flames, maybe.
Yeah, and also they announced it at this point last year, like quite early on. I've got a feeling like it feels like it's been a long time now that it's been
The rumor
known
started nearly a year
that
ago. Yeah.
she's going, and the problem is the longer you keep that in the air, the more people are going to be confused as to. I thought I heard she's gone. No, you just know she's going. So that's why I think ideally they didn't want to announce her going while this was airing, while Flux was airing. I think they wanted to hold it off a bit.
The UK ratings have continued to be incredibly disappointing. I mean, there are people out there spinning these, which I find extraordinary. I don't know what to say. God bless them. If it brings them some sort of pleasure, I don't know. I as much as I love fantasy entertainment and retreating into that, there's a reality to the figures, not just for Flux, but for the entire Chris Chibnall era, when the trajectory is next to consistently, week by week, installment by installment, down and down and down. You cannot spin these kind of figures. You cannot spin that arrow to go upwards. So we've got a final figure. The overnights for episode 6 of Flux, the Vanquishers, was a 3.58 million. Again, a big chunk down from the 3.82 million the previous week. We have a consolidated figure too, obviously, because it's been a few weeks on from that. The consolidated figure was just 4.5 million viewers, which was less. I mean, it's not the lowest of the season. It's not the lowest of the season, but it's not far off. Not great figures by anybody's standards. And looking across to the audience appreciation index figure, which aren't getting reported quite so willingly across the Doctor Who universe this series. And the AAI figures, just for those out there who don't know what it is, I do think they are more important than ever. This is a measure of how much the audience actually enjoyed the program that they've actually watched, because you don't know until you've actually watched it whether you're going to enjoy it or not, do you? And then by then you count as a viewer, you become part of the ratings. So the idea is with these audience appreciation index figures is that the score is compiled from a specially selected panel of around 5,000 people who then go online after a show has aired and they rate their experience watching it, and they comment on the shows at a secured location. And this is the very first time that an entire season of Doctor Who has languished in the 70s there. So episode 6, that rested on the figure of 76, which is the exact same number that they came in on with the Halloween Apocalypse, not quite down to the low of Once Upon a Time of 75. And I know that doesn't sound too bad for there to be 1 or 2 points in between these two figures. But in the case of the AAIs, I'm never entirely sure why this is. That those gaps, how they're quantified, they mean a tremendous amount. So if a show, I think that the idea is that if anything polls less than, I think it's 78, I think that's the watermark figure, that it's seen as a failure and a show that it's viable as a cancellation. So when you're looking at the shape of this and the series finishes exactly where it started, you could say, well, what has it lost? Which would be true, but it just goes to show that the show is in bad shape, that its relationship with the British public, with the general audience, is the worst that it's been in several decades. There is no way to spin these figures, is there, Kyle?
No, and it's not much better here in the States, too. I mean, it's just, I think it's, Here in the States, Doctor Who consolidated rating of 4.89 million for the first 5 episodes of Flux is weaker than anything that was in Series 12. That's saying something. So the boat has sailed on this version of Doctor Who. It sailed the minute they announced Jodie was leaving, Chibnall was leaving, and that Russell came in. People are just like, okay, I think everybody's of the mindset that Russell's just going to reset everything, much like he did the first go around anyway. And I think people checked out. I think people have checked out on this, and they're just sitting back and wait till Bad Wolf and Russell step in, and then I'll be back. But it's done, and I suspect that the remaining specials that come out will be even lower ratings, except for whatever is going to be the final special where Jodie regenerates.
Yeah, and also this could have been in another universe. This could have been like a Capaldi, that his last series is considered by a lot in the fandom in the UK as one of his best. A lot of people take a lot more to him and Bill than he had with Clara. That series seems to be seen as Moffat almost finally got it all together, and Chris could have had that moment with him and his Doctor. It could have been, well, I didn't like series 11 or 12, but at least series 13 gave me a bit of something. But he's not even got that. And as we're coming to the end of his era now, we've got to think about legacy and how he's going to be remembered. And he could have had a final flourish to say, look, I at least gave you some good episodes before I went, but he couldn't even do that.
No, there is no legacy for Chris Chibnall. His legacy is that he wiped out, he destroyed 50 years of Doctor Who canon. That is his legacy as it stands right now. And what's going to end up happening with that aspect of it is it's just going to be thrown out with the bathwater of everything else. This show is going to, when Chibnall took over, they thought the show was going to regenerate completely across the board. It was going to be a change of feel of the show. It was going to be kind of going back to maybe it's more for kids route, that kind of thing. This show has been a mitigated disaster, and it's a lot of it falls on Chibnall, and he was in over his head doing this main Doctor Who. He was good on Torchwood because he wasn't affecting the mass canon. He was writing his own thing. Same with Broadchurch. He's writing his own thing. Chris Chibnall should not be taking over a massive franchise. He is not qualified to do so. He might be able to do his own original ideas better than he's able to execute this, but it's going to go down as an unmitigated disaster. It's going to go down as, whether fair or not, one of the worst versions of Doctor Who we've ever seen, and it's going to be looked at as Russell becoming the true savior of Doctor Who, not once but twice, because I can't imagine in my own head, if nothing else, when Russell comes back, there's at least going to be continuity within the stories and the characters, where that just never existed here.
Or for me, we're going to get or for me with Russell, if my big hope is we're going to get the Doctor back, because for the last 3 series, that's what's been hard for me, not seeing that main character. And it's not just a gender thing. It's because I think Chris Chibnall fundamentally does not understand the Doctor. It's like, we didn't talk about it, but a lot of the press in the UK, Jodie's choice to allow a genocide to happen has been brought up and highlighted. And multiple people have talked about that, saying that's not a Doctor thing to do.
Well, also, Charlotte, wasn't that exactly what she bollocked that general character for in week 2?
Yes. So that's the problem with this Doctor. She's written as a walking hypocrite. But that's the thing, though. With Russell, he knows the Doctor. He knows that character, and I just want to be able to watch my show again and go, there they are. I'll say they because we don't know what he's going to do with gender, but I just want to say that's the Doctor.
How many?
Can I ask a quick question, guys?
Yeah, of course.
Is it just me too, or with all the loss of universal life during the Flux, and if we would have had Capaldi, if we would have had Tennant, if we would have had Smith, if we would have had even Eccleston, there would have been a registration to the Doctor of that loss of life.
Yeah, there would have been sadness, there would have been regret, there would have been anything, but with Jodie's Doctor, it doesn't register.
Doesn't register at all, does it? There's not even a sort of, I've got bigger things to deal with. It literally doesn't register at all.
Yeah, and I was like talking with some of my mates, and I said, do you know what you could have done if you didn't want to write it, do a big speech? You could have just had the hand shaking or like a little bit of just to show hesitation. And there was no hesitation on her part in that finale to go, yep, you're all going to get consumed by the flux.
Peter Capaldi recently spoke about the character in an interview, a brand new interview. And they asked him, because he doesn't speak about Doctor Who very often. He's a very busy actor. So he's generally speaking, he's talking up the work that he's doing now or that album that he made a few months ago, whatever else it is. But he spoke a little about the character. And he said that in his head, the current perception that the BBC has of the character as it exists as a pop culture sort of identity is that it's sort of more a sort of magical, impish character now than it was before. And I know exactly what he means. I think that the version of the character that exists inside Whittaker's head is a combination of what she thinks David Tennant was doing rather than what he was actually doing. You know, David Tennant is a great actor who understood the role and worked it on several levels. But she isn't attuned enough to see that. So to her, she just sees somebody who runs around and goes wide-eyed occasionally. So it's a combination of that and whatever Chris Chibnall has put inside her head. But she plays it as a kind of as a magical, impish character who sort of blips in, says a few things, waves a magic wand, and blips out again. I think Capaldi's right. I think it's been cheapened by all this, and it's largely down to Chris Chibnall's inability to write and develop the character and to anchor it in anything that we recognise either from the series past or that we may see in any of us or in any of the incarnations that we've latched onto in the past. Looking specifically at the Vanquishers, though, I'd love to know how many fob watches out of 5 do you give this particular episode, Charlotte?
I honestly can't give it anything, because for me this was like Once Upon a Time but worse, because there wasn't a coherent story. You can have multiple things, like we said, you can do Journey's End, which is what this was trying to be. You can have a lot of characters, you can have a lot of different storylines if you want, but they all have to come together and make sense. And this episode had to come together. We had to get answers, like you said. And we actually had to, I think for the characters of the Doctor, for Yaz, for Dan, we had to almost be able to see the changes they've done throughout this series. And for me, none of that happened. It was a lot of flashbang. It was a lot of distractions. And even the good moments, whether it's Jericho's character or the little good bits of acting, they weren't given enough room for me to even enjoy those bits. Whereas other episodes I've not liked, I can go, well, at least this character I liked, or this bit of the story I liked. But with this, I didn't even have that because everything was underserved. So, yeah, I can't give this anything. Sort of like you, I know you and Simon did for Once Upon a Time. This is sort of my episode that's very like that.
How about you, Carl?
I have to at least give it a 1, A, to justify my time watching it, and 2, there are actors in this episode who are trying and putting forth an amazing effort to try to make something out of this, and they just can't, and it's not their fault, but they put in a lot of effort, and I got to give them at least a little bit of credit there for the effort they put in to do this. So it gets a 1 for me.
I can't give it anything either. I'd like to, and in some respects I think it was better than Once Upon a Time, but we're also 3 or 4 episodes into this. It's later in the day. The fact that Once Upon a Time was never meant to wrap anything up. This was. And so, yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you, Charlotte. And for a third time in less than 10 episodes, I'm awarding an episode of Doctor Who. That 0 figure, I think that this kind of it barely even qualifies as a screenplay, as a piece of television. Certainly doesn't warrant a rewatch. Sorry again, Charlotte. It doesn't warrant a rewatch or even really a second thought. And I do think that it will be forgotten about in next to no time at all. Doctor Who Flux concluded late last year, and as of recording, we're just a few days away for all the completists out there. We know that there are some of you. The physical media release is on the way on the 22nd of January. The whole of Doctor Who Flux can be yours to own on DVD or Blu-ray, and in to be fair, a gorgeous looking steelbook. That's on the way. Although that is the entirety of Flux Vanquished here on our show, we will be back to talk about the New Year's Day special, Eve of the Daleks, in due course. Not exactly sure when. I think we all need somewhat of a palate cleanser after all these episodes of Flux. You mentioned it earlier on, Carl. You've sort of watched the whole thing all in one. You've ploughed through it all, haven't you? So you need a rest.
Oh, I gotta ask though before we get out of here. I have two questions. One, you just asked us what we give for this particular episode. Now that we have the Flux as a whole, how many watches would we give it? Because
that's really hard to do.
I would think I would at least give it a 1.5 because of a couple of episodes that had some hope, a little bit of hope in them. As far as if you look at them as standalone episodes. Yeah, that's like probably where I would go.
Jamie's did some really good directing work. We had some nice some nice characters. So it's not, you need to sort of give points for that. So
parts of it represented a step up from what we got in series 12. Like I said, the fact that it was diverting for a couple of weeks, it never truly felt like Doctor Who coming together to be the show that I knew. It at least seemed like serviceable fantasy adventure, undisciplined but serviceable for a couple of weeks. I think, we traditionally on Type 40, once a series is wrapped up, we do come back to it and have a complete review of the entire series, usually with a couple of extra guests. That may happen this time. We'll see how things go later on as the specials start to drip out. I'm thinking of one person in particular who might be tempted to come on and chat to us all, as he does now and again. Mr. Mosby, what do you think? Let's see if we can have a word with him about all of that. So I'm gonna resist scoring it all for now, because I think there's something to consider there, and I think maybe with the passage of time, with the passage of time, I'll be good on exactly what I said earlier on. I'm just going to have forgotten about the majority of. I was going to say, consign it.
Just going to go out your head, like
just consign it to the Doctor Who history book. That's the old girl starting up and calling time on this edition of Type 40. That was episode 98, Carl. Would you believe it?
It just seems like yesterday, but then again, I can't believe I'm starting year 6 of the Fandom Podcast Network here. So as long as we stay out of a state of flux, I think we're good.
I'll be back with another edition of the show soon enough. Look out for that wherever you found this. It could have been on the dedicated home feed for Type 40, type40.podbean.com, or it could have been on Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, Podbay, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. There's more and more by the month. I can barely keep track of them. You can get in touch with us. You can get in touch with us too through our social media, Instagram and Twitter. And try that again. Instagram and Twitter at Type40 Doctor Who, or you can email us type40doctorwho@gmail.com. We're also on YouTube, the world's largest streaming platform, as part of the Fandom Podcast Network's own master feed and YouTube channel, or here on the Spacebook YouTube channel too. Speaking of which, we've started putting these out too now as podcasts, our Type 40 live stream shows. Okay, we're a little bit past Christmas now, but we're time travelers. We're Doctor Who fans. If you haven't checked out the big Type 40 live Christmas party full of all manner of Christmas hijinks. It's a Christmas cracker. Comes in at over 2.5 hours worth of the usual merriment from the usual faces and voices. That's up on the feed too. Don't miss that. We always have a laugh recording those, don't we, Charlotte?
Oh, yes.
I have a question. Was it about an hour and 20 minutes in where you guys just went straight to the rum instead of the eggnog and you just started going for the rum during your Christmas party?
open the hard stuff. Open the hard stuff. And if you're feeling really, really brave, you can join the Type 40 Facebook group. So yeah, head over to Facebook and type 40 into the search field there, and you'll find our social media group full of generations upon generations of Doctor Who fans from all over the world and a few other worlds. Yes, we've got some suspicions about some of you, but they're sharing and geeking out, sometimes arguing, about all things time and space, the past, the present, and the future of all things Doctor Who. Kyle, where can people hear and see more of you across social media, and particularly at the Fandom Podcast Network?
Well, of course, it starts at the homepage of the Fandom Podcast Network at fpnet.podbean.com. You can hear me on several shows there, including Culture Clash, our flagship show, which covers everything that's going on in fandom. Of course, we have our new Marvel MCU show, True Believers. Kind of going a little break on that because we don't have a lot of Marvel stuff after Spider-Man No Way Home, but we had a huge Spider-Man special, also the wrap-up of Hawkeye on Disney Plus, which I was a big fan of. And then, of course, just all the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network, including Type 40. And as far as me on social media, you can find me on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom.
Where can people hear more from you, Charlotte?
Well, I'm not on social media, so you will hear me on Type 40 Live, and I appear on Daniel Leach's channel on YouTube. We do Line of Duty mainly together and other bits and bobs. We've even had Dan on for a stream, which is good fun with JT.
Yeah,
so if you want to have a bit of variety, a bit of food, but then a bit of whatever takes our fancy, me and Daniel on YouTube. So that's Daniel Leach.
Good stuff. And you can catch up with me on Twitter and Instagram as the Spacebook, where I'm sharing and geeking out about all things pop culture inside and outside of the TARDIS. So come and say hello there and see what's caught my eye as we begin yet another year. 2022, we're absolutely living in the future. Apparently the Jetsons was set in 2022, so somebody told me this week.
No. It was that George Jetson was born in 2022.
Oh, is that what it was? So this is another bit of trivia that came my way recently. So that got my imagination fired up, I have to say. Why aren't we flying around in those wonderful disc-like cars by now? Why aren't we all living with dogs that can talk just like Carvanista?
or hoverboards from Back to the Future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need these things in our lives, but we do have Type 40 in our lives and in our ears. We'll be back with more of this soon. We always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40, but for now, that's it. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.